Welcome to Staying Sweet, the podcast. Tune into my weekly podcast to hear me, Alice Bradley, delve deeper into building your brand and enjoying a luxury lifestyle. All while staying sweet, of course. Whether you're looking to level up in business, start something of your own, or balance a more exciting, fulfilling, and healthier lifestyle, each episode will be created especially to inspire and encourage your own success so you can really have it all. Plus, don't miss out on the Staying Sweet specials, a series of exclusive interviews and conversations with Alice Bradley's network of inspiring entrepreneurs and brand owners. Always protect your sweetness, your light is not a weakness. Don't forget, there are new episodes every Monday. For daily content, you can check out my Instagram and you can follow me at alicelucybradley. Stay sweet! Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode. It's episode 3 of Staying Sweet, the podcast. I'm so happy to have you all here. I am just really ready to go. I'm itching to get this podcast recorded because there's been a little bit of a gap between the first 2 episodes that you've been hearing or listening to and this one, and what's sort of been happening in that space of time? Well, I actually launched the podcast yesterday over on my Instagram and my other social platforms like TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook as well. It was amazing and just the most surreal experience to finally let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, and share this podcast with you. I really, really am so grateful for all the positive vibes and the messages of support and encouragement. It's just been pretty surreal. So I actually shared a video over on Reels with highlights of just a few little elements of the podcast, just to tease you guys and lure you in and hopefully showcase what this podcast is sort of about. And I have to say, it's been my highest performing reel. It's nearly at 12k views, which, oh my goodness, I've never gone past 8 or 9k. So the fact that I've gone and nearly hit 12 is surreal to me. And it's a video that's literally just my podcast art and little snippets of my first podcast. So yeah, I just wanted to say the biggest thank you, and I can't wait to see where this podcast goes. All of you listening, you have been the motivation and the inspiration behind this. So I'm really very grateful to have you all on board, and I hope that any new listeners in the future, if you're listening and you found my podcast somehow in the ether that is the internet, I'm so glad you're here, and I really hope you stick around because there are some really exciting podcasts coming up. Speaking of exciting podcasts, I want to update you all on my week. Obviously, my podcast went live this week, which has been amazing. But I have already been contacted by a stream of people who want to get involved in the podcast and want to impart their knowledge in some way. I have had some really incredible pitches from industry leaders and people that I know, friends, contacts, that type of thing. I cannot wait to bring you all the tea, the advice, everything, the life lessons. I'm so excited to dive into this podcast, and I think that's where the enthusiasm to keep on going is going to come from, the motivation to keep creating. I think when you're creating something behind the scenes and you haven't yet shared it with the wider world or friends, family, that type of thing, it can feel really lonely, and it's a kind of time that invites self-doubt in. You know, imposter syndrome goes, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure this is the right move for you? And actually, when you announce something, it's kind of like, right, I'm jumping now. And I said that in my first podcast. Sometimes you just have to jump. There's no right time for anything. And yesterday, I wasn't even going to launch the podcast. Like, that was really spontaneous, and I decided to do it. I knew I had to do it on a Monday because each podcast is going to go live on a Monday. But the decision to actually launch it yesterday came over the weekend, and it was right, let's get this ready for launch. And I just spent my whole entire Sunday getting my life together. And you know what? It was stripped back, and yet it was still very successful. So I'm really, really pleased with how everything sort of turned out. And I want you guys to know that messy action can lead to more motivation, more energy to kind of strive for better things. So that's how I feel. I feel really elated this week. I'm in such a good mood. I cannot wait to get my friends and my network involved in this podcast. So I want to kickstart this fresh episode with an affirmation for the week, something that's going to drive you throughout this week and motivate you. And I want it to focus on this idea of being in the moment, sitting in success, finding your calling and sitting in success. So the affirmation for this week is, I am content sitting in this moment and appreciating where I am. And that's something that I actually did yesterday. I was reflecting on the launch. I took some time to go on a walk, and I just felt so overwhelmed with happiness. Like, I couldn't believe how many people had decided to share my podcast, share my Instagram post, share the link to it, even just dropping me a DM to tell me that they had listened to the podcast. Every single message has meant so much to me and has led me to feel this like euphoric, I don't know, it's like an elation. It's the weirdest thing. And I've launched quite a few things. I've done lots of different things for my social media platforms, like launching YouTube, deciding to do vlogs. But for some reason, this podcast got a different kind of attention. And not that attention is everything, but it really inspired me and gave me this like boost of encouragement. And yeah, I just really found myself smiling the whole of yesterday. And I had a few photography clients, and I was just sort of beaming away and walking around London. And at one point I had some time to kill, and I was just sat on a bench in Chelsea, and I was just thinking, oh my goodness, this is a moment I don't want to forget. So I'm popping it in this podcast because I don't want to forget this moment. So take the time this week to think about what you are enjoying about your current present moment. Sit in the moment and just be appreciative of whatever it's bringing you, whether it's motivating you, inspiring you, making you realize that you deserve and want better. Whatever it is, this is your call to action. This is your affirmation. So yeah, super exciting. So this week's podcast, I am going to be focusing on finding your calling. Now, I wanted to start with something broad because finding your calling is essentially the backbone and like the very first thing you think of when you look at starting your own business or finding where you want to go in your career. Whatever it is as a wider theme, finding your calling is the starting point. You can strip this back and take this back to when we were at school and we had to choose our GCSEs and then our A-levels and then deciding whether or not we wanted to go into uni. Like, those decisions were part of finding our calling. And thinking back to it, finding your calling when you're 14, 15, 16, and then again when you're in your late teens and early 20s to go to uni, it baffles me because I don't think we truly know who we are at that age. We're a certain person and will be who we think we are in that moment, and that person is still valid, but we are not going to be that same person, you know, in our mid-20s, into our 30s, 40s and beyond. We are always going to be evolving. So finding your calling is something that you are going to be doing throughout your entire life, whether you like it or not. And I've learned that the hard way, I guess. Well, not even the hard way. Just I've come to understand that you do not find your calling at a young age and then that's it. You will navigate different ideas and paths. You'll try things. You might get invited to something and actually go, wow, this is a bit of me. And I've had that with a lot of opportunities. And I think that's why I wanted to touch on it today. So by definition, finding your calling is doing something that you enjoy, something that comes naturally to you. Or despite the challenges, you always have a task associated with it that leaves you on a high and not a low. Like, it's not draining. You always leave the situation feeling better off. And I think that's how I felt this whole time on social media. Don't get me wrong, like I have my low moments, but I get such a high from talking and engaging with other people and being present in a more public sphere. And I really think I get a high off of helping other people in my own little way, whether it be like in a vlog or a video and now a podcast. Like I really think my calling is chatting away and talking, which is so funny because honestly, it makes me laugh. I think back to a parents' evening that I had at school, and bless, oh my gosh, my textiles teacher, I could talk for England. And I remember her speaking to me and my mum, and she just said, yeah, Alice talks way too much. Like, she's not going to make it. She is not going to make it in business. She talks way too much. But that is where you find your purpose and you find your passion. My passion is clearly talking, and you bring it into something that you want to do, and that is where it drives you forward. So yeah, that is a really random anecdote, and I can't believe I brought that up, but I do often think about that teacher, and I just remember her saying, like, you won't really amount to anything if you can't stop talking. But maybe that is my calling. Maybe I need to be constantly talking and joking around. I don't know. I don't think you're supposed to do just one thing forever. I really don't. I think that's an old-fashioned way of thinking, and it really stunts your growth and your experimentation. I don't think you can wholeheartedly go into something and say, that's it, that's all I want from life now at 15, 16. I truly do not believe that is the case. So how do you tell if you found your calling? Now, for me, I knew I had an inkling when I was working in fashion and I was doing like lots of internships. I went through a period actually at uni when I was interning like every other month, and it was like a high of chasing the next internship or the next job. Magazines, again, was a big one for me, a big passion of mine from a very, very young age. I started collecting magazines from the age of 5. I was reading them, consuming them, collecting them even, and I still have all my magazines. I don't throw any of my magazines away. Those little things navigate you towards your purpose, and they really do enable you to realize like what your calling is. Now, a magazine, just reading a magazine, that was a high for me, and I always found myself getting super excited to pick one out when a new one came out. I would be reading it from front to back and just analyzing it. It's funny when we talk about our callings and our goals in life, where we see ourselves in the future. I remember when I was very, very little, I think the first idea I had in my head was that I was going to be a fashion designer or a fashion model, and that was a very young, innocent sort of understanding of a wider theme that I enjoyed, which was fashion and consuming things within the fashion industry. But obviously when you go into the fashion industry, you realize there are so many different jobs that involve that one thing, and that is where you can truly find your calling and your purpose. And it's not until you get your foot in the door, or even kind of work out what is out there for you, that you realize that there is so much to experiment with, and that you shouldn't close yourself off. You shouldn't say, I'm only going to pursue this. And I think that's why in this day and age, we are so multi-skilled and multifaceted. We are a generation yearning for more. We want more from ourselves and we want more from life. And finding your calling is part of that. I really don't think you can go into a career feeling as though the job that you're in now is the only job that you'll have and will be the only avenue of your industry that you will consider pursuing. You may stick to it. It may be something that is so ingrained and is right for you, but if it isn't, it really is not the end of the world. And I think you can probably tell that from the way in which I sort of flit around and I try new things. I guess I'm going to use myself as an example because this is a solo episode and we're talking all things like anecdotes and things related to my experiences. But I have to say, my idea of what the fashion industry was from a young age was very one-dimensional, two-dimensional. It was very shallow, and I only really saw maybe one or two job opportunities from a young age. I didn't really understand how broad it is and what was out there. Even at degree level, I did not realize how transferable my skills were. I didn't realize that I could explore other passions and pursuits. And I think, unfortunately, when you're at school and you're making selections, it feels like it is the end of the world. And I know I want to touch on this in a completely separate podcast about the fact that sometimes university is not for you, or higher education is not for you. That is for a whole other podcast. But in today's episode, I think when we're talking more broader themes like finding your calling, it's about not limiting yourself to one idea of what you expect your life to be. Finding your calling can be a really experimental stage in your life, and I think we should always do it regularly. We shouldn't limit ourselves to how often we allow ourselves to get into that state of experimentation. And I think I've been doing it sort of every couple of years, trying out new things, seeing if it works for me. New things come into the world as well. Trends change. Taking working from home, for example, that was a very off the wall, experimental ideal. And the 9 to 5 was very much the focus and what was encouraged and forced upon us, I think, in society. And that was what was deemed the norm. And I think now we're really challenging how we work. And I think that's really great for finding our calling. There's so many people who have changed career paths in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. And sometimes it takes a mass shift in societal norms for people to step out of their comfort zone. These things are shifting the way in which we work. And I think that's how we have to see our callings and our purposes and our passions in life. I think a lot of people are stepping back from high pressure jobs to pursue what actually makes them happy. And actually that makes me so happy to know that people are following their dreams. And I know that sounds really cringy and cliche, but your calling is just that. It's this state of flow and ease with certain tasks, like the things that really set your soul on fire and are easy to do. They are often a sign of being your calling or being your purpose. Like if you wake up in the morning and you're excited to tackle those tasks or work on this particular project, those are the types of jobs you should be pursuing. And that is when your output is going to be high, because things just flow and these ideas just generate naturally. You find yourself being able to commit to things without feeling restricted or under pressure. It's just a nice place to be. I think if you can naturally make progress both in success and also how you take feedback on board, then you're onto something really amazing. And it really does need to be an energy gainer and not an energy drainer. How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel good? Do you feel like you could get up the next day super early and tackle those tasks? Are you itching to get stuck into the projects that you're setting up for yourself? Like whatever it is that you think is your calling or your passion, that is where you have to show up and offer more energy, offer more of yourself to that specific area of your life. So for me, it was the fashion industry. There were so many telltale signs. I knew I had lots of ideas. I was always thinking about how I could, be featured in magazines or show up an intern or shoot photography. It's crazy, and I can't wait to share all these different anecdotes with you, because thinking about it, I actually have dipped my toes in different elements of the industry and I've learned a lot of lessons. So definitely expect some more sort of anecdotal stories in the coming episodes. I honestly can't wait to share it with you all. I guess if you've tuned into this podcast in the hope of getting a better understanding into this particular industry and you're wanting to tap into this industry, I want you to think about what your calling would be. If you could pick right now a particular job role, and we're just going to use that as an example, and I just want you to think and answer these questions, maybe in your head or in your notes or in your journal. Think about the pros and cons of choosing this option. So let's take the job as a fashion photographer as an example. Now, a fashion photographer, you could go and be hired by a studio, or you could work freelance. I'm going to use freelance as an example because that is what I do, and I feel like I could probably offer anecdotal answers, not necessarily to reflect my exact experience, but just to kind of give you guys an idea of something. So a fashion photographer, I want to be a fashion photographer. Where do I go? What am I doing currently? Say I'm in a really high, well-paid job, secure. I'm feeling like it pays the bills and it's great. It's easy money, but it's not what I want to do. I want to be a fashion photographer, and I don't really have any clients yet, but I have a camera and I want to start shooting. Think about the pros and cons, weigh up the pros and cons of the calling itself, not of the external things that you have to consider, like financial things. Because sometimes making the call to follow your passion is not going to serve you financially, but it could be the best decision of your life. It could literally change how you feel about yourself, how you think about yourself, how you value your entire life. Now, you could be in this really insanely well-paid job, but it's making you miserable. That is where you're going to realize in that moment that you have found your calling. If the idea of shooting fashion photography lights you up, and maybe you've shot some content, maybe you have stuff in, a folder on your computer and you're really proud, but you feel like, I can't go anywhere with this because I have this full-time job. I can't take on clients. Maybe you don't have time at the weekends to do it as a side hustle. When you're weighing up the pros and cons of your calling, if it is something that you've realized you want to pursue and you need to step away from your career, or you need to move, or you need to change how you work as a family unit, you really have to assess the pros and cons, and you have to look at, is it all worth it? And at the end of the day, knowing if something is worth it is not dependent on materialistic things like financial stability and security. I know those things are very important, especially if you have a family, but you have to consider this idea that sometimes the level up is a level up in happiness, or true passion, true excitement. Those things have value as well. Your quality of life is valuable. I think I realized this very early on in my career, and I kind of cringe when I think about it, but I realized it in my grad job. And I remember having a conversation with one of my parents, and I just kind of disclosed how miserable I felt and that it wasn't for me. I could not see myself doing this commute into London, work for someone who I felt did not value me or respect me, and then come home for a measly pay packet. But I honestly thought that was how life was going to have to be. And I didn't endure that job for very long. In fact, I think I lasted about 6 months, which, again, when you look at the industry and you look at how we're taught to see our graduate jobs, we're taught that our graduate job is what it is. We just have to accept what we're given, and we have to tolerate it in order to level up and become respected in the industry. We have to earn our title. Now, I remember challenging some older members in my family and just sort of thinking to myself, I don't want that to be the case. I don't want to have to go to a job that I absolutely hate, that is making me physically ill and making me feel so low that I don't even know what life is all about anymore. Like I honestly felt an emptiness that I hope no one ever has to experience. And yeah, I didn't last very long. I had to quit the job, and I had to let go of the idea that success was going to be a staircase and I had to climb my way to the top. I had to earn the respect of those above me in order to be valuable in this industry. And yeah, it was a really hard time because I had no plan. I had no means to keep myself afloat, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was like I didn't want to take anyone's BS, and I just knew I had to be my own boss. And I think I just decided one day that I was going to leave, and I had no plan. I wasn't in the best sort of financial position. I hadn't saved a lot of money. I'd been spending it, and I don't think it was the greatest decision. If I was an outsider looking in, I think there would be a lot of people telling me, you know, Alice, that's really not a good idea. But in the long term, I think it was the kick up the bum that I needed, and it made me realize what I didn't want. It made me realize that there was something better out there for me. I didn't know what it was, and at that point I hadn't really found my calling, but I knew I couldn't do what I was doing every single day. And actually, at the time of this grad job, I had started dabbling in photography. I was attending sort of London Fashion Week every season, and I did like one season right before I quit my job. I think it was around September time, and I'd been given on a whim the opportunity to shoot for an upcoming magazine and shoot some photos, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that again was the kick up the bum, because I had to take holiday to obviously attend those shows. And I just remember thinking, oh, I don't want to have to factor in holiday or get permission to do things. I want to be able to just go out there and do things myself and make those decisions and show up where I want to show up, and not have to ask someone to let me go and do something. So I think I realized very early on that I wanted to be my own boss. And again, if you're sat there thinking, oh, I really feel the same way, I don't want to work for anyone else, again, that could be a sign that your calling is you pursuing your own thing and finding your own way. I think my advice now would just be have a little bit of a plan or a rough idea of where you want to go. I think my grad job was a lot of life lessons rolled into one in a very short space of time. It was eye-opening and not what I expected at all. I remember having the job lined up. I was actually interning for my dream magazine publication, and I had this fantastic paid internship, and I was loving life. And I remember being offered the job whilst I was there. Now, when you're in an internship and a job is offered to you, you kind of think, well, I have to take the job, the thing that offers me the sturdy, secure, long-term pay packet. And I remember asking people in the office of the magazine that I was working for, and I was thinking, is this the right move? And I think looking back at it now, it probably wasn't. I think I probably would have had a better quality of life from the internship. And who knows, I might have even had a job out of that internship, but I decided to make the financial decision, the money move, and go with the job that was secure. And I think everything does happen for a reason. You know, I might not be where I am here today, sat doing this podcast telling you these things, but I do think to myself, I wonder what life would have been like in those 6 months had I not decided to go for the money move and just gone for the happiness and the industry experience. Because the job that I ended up having, the grad job, was kind of in industry. It wasn't in fashion, but it was in PR, and I really didn't enjoy it. I can appreciate PR, I really can, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't where I felt like I was thriving. So I guess when you're finding your calling, sometimes sitting in the uncomfortableness that is, this is not where I want to be, is sometimes a good thing, because it does motivate you. It gives you this, right, well, I need to find something that actually is ticking the boxes for me, you know, making me feel good. I learned a lot very quickly about what I didn't want and what I didn't want to be if I had my own business and if I was a business owner. I realised who I wanted to show up as a boss. And I think walking away from that job with no plan, I left and I didn't look back. I have been self-employed ever since. And I think stepping away from that and allowing the years to kind of fly by like they have done, looking back, I think it was the best move for me. I just did not have a plan in motion, and there was no financial security for me. I was very lucky to have accepting and understanding parents, but I was not in a great financial situation. But I was in this sort of low vibrational state for a while because I was navigating being essentially unemployed with no plan, and knowing that I didn't want to find a job. I wanted to be my own boss. It was like this vicious cycle of, I know what I want from my life, but it hasn't worked out yet. Like the pieces of the puzzle are just all sprawled out. Like I haven't actually worked out how to put all the puzzle pieces together. And I only now feel like life is coming together and forming a picture. So between leaving my job in October 2018 and starting my business, registering my business in March 2019, I had this gap where I did the odd bit of freelancing and I was just working out what I wanted to do. I wasn't really sure. Like I thought I wanted to do photography, but I honestly didn't really have the knowledge or the skill set. I was still learning. I don't know. It kind of felt like a really rookie thing to do, to register a business in something that I really didn't have much skill set on. Like, I'll be honest, I don't even think I could use my camera to the best of its ability, but I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a photographer. It's almost like I knew, I felt it in my gut. It was a gut instinct. And I remember having some time off because I'd left my job and my boss decided to pay me the month in advance. So I ended up getting 2 months worth of my salary in 1 month. And I decided to go to New York, and on a whim flew there. It was this amazing whirlwind weekend, and it really gave me the factory reset I needed. It was like, this is what life is about. It's not about a 9-to-5 job that makes me feel crappy. It's about doing things that excite me and feel spontaneous and, just don't feel like the normal, mundane, this is how life has to be now, societal pressure. Like, it was just the best thing that I could have possibly done. And I ended up doing a whole year of that, basically. I was freelancing. I still am, actually, but with travel restrictions, it's a lot more difficult. But at that time, it was honestly the best year. And I was saying yes to all these crazy opportunities. I was just experimenting and seeing what it is that I wanted to actually pursue and do with my life. And it was a bit like a gap year, but for my goals. Just seeing what was out there, and some things stuck, some things didn't. And I think that's what you have to really think about and just allow. Some pursuits, some callings that you might feel like you need to try out might not stick, but that's okay. And I think that brings me quite nicely on to this feeling of just knowing what your calling is. When you find something that just fits, it will serve you with unwavering confidence. Like, you will not be able to let go of it for love nor money. Like, it doesn't matter what it brings you. If it brings you happiness, you will make it work. It doesn't matter about the money. It doesn't matter about all the other external noise. Experiment. Let go of expectation. If you're being put off by doing something because you're worried about what others think, you're actively blocking your blessings. Let go of that. Ignore the noise. Ignore the expectation that you need to have your life together in your 20s, that you need to know what you want to do. Use it as an experimental, let's have fun stage. Ultimately as well, people are going to talk whether you're doing what they want you to do or not. So just do you. Experiment. See where your life takes you. You are in control of that direction. So it might as well be doing something that makes you feel happy. And I think that's what I've realized as well. I'm not going to be too specific in the situations that I sort of came across, but I remember having conversations with previous friends, I guess, and family members who were just like, well, is this really, is this a job? Like, have you actually got a job? And although they were kind of right, I had to be like, no, leave me alone. I know what I want to do. I know what I want to achieve. Just let me prove it to you. I think my advice to that though now would be, you don't need to prove yourself. You really don't. You just need to cut out the noise, ignore the noise, focus on you. And if you attempt something, try it, make it stick, but it's not working, don't force it either. And if people bear judgment on that and they go, oh, well, that's another goal you've not achieved, that's another thing you've not, finalized and finished, then those people really do not need to be in your life. I've also really been learning to let go of the idea that if I have an idea, I have to see it through to the end, because there is this expectation that everything has to be finished and everything has to lead to something mega successful. And I think that's what I've come to realize with certain pursuits in social media. I honestly had people in my life who'd say, well, your page isn't that big. Is it really worth all this work that you're putting in when your page isn't even, it's not that big, Alice? Like, why do you put all that effort in? Ignore those people. Those people are so low vibrational. They're almost assuming that your focus is on numbers and stats and money and success. Granted, those things are great. But if it brings you happiness, that is the main focus. That is what they should be happy for. That's what they should be celebrating, you feeling happy. Once you've found something that you want to label your calling, I think you should make a plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but it just needs to be a rough strategy. Like, where do you want to take it? Things you want to experiment with, things you want to try out, people you want to talk to. Work out how you can make this thing a part of your life, because your calling might be something that you've never done before. Reach out to people, follow people on Instagram, set up an Instagram page, contact people in that industry and ask questions. Be nosy and be curious. If you don't have a calling, or if nothing feels right, don't give up hope in the pursuit of finding something that is. You never know. I know people who have found their purpose in their late 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s. Sometimes you're not going to find what you're supposed to do until later on in life. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the journey that you're being presented. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up everything that I want to chat about in today's episode. Maybe I've got super passionate today. I feel like I have. And I also find when I'm chatting in these episodes, sudden anecdotes come to mind, and I think, gosh, am I just rambling here? Am I just talking rubbish? You guys will have to let me know if I am. But this week's journal prompt, something that I want to recenter us back to before I end today's podcast. Now, I really want you to think about this one, because it brings us into the now and it brings us into the present moment. So I want you to write, how do I feel right now in this moment? What would I say my calling is now? Free write from those questions and see where it takes you. I would honestly note this down, because writing and free writing is a great way to just let your brain throw things out. I find I'm more focused and I get a more detailed understanding of my inner self through expressing it onto paper, and just these words will come out and I'm just thinking, where did that come from? Like, it just all kind of spews out of me. So yeah, how do I feel right now in this moment? What would I say my calling is, in this now? You never know what might come forward. An idea might spark and you might be able to kind of detail some things. See where that takes you. And finally, there is no such thing as wanting too much if you're willing to do the work. If the lifestyle you want is expensive, honey, just own it. Don't listen to people who tell you need to be realistic, or that your calling is too crazy or off the wall. If it's something that you've never done before, allow yourself to be free in the pursuit of your calling. Your calling can be as big or as small as you want it to be. It could be literally just a hobby, or it could change your entire life and be your career path or your life purpose. It doesn't really need to bring you monetary gain, but if it does, then, that's what you're meant to do. And most importantly, it must bring you a sense of fulfillment and happiness. I think that is the biggest thing that I want to leave you guys with. Just do things that make you feel happy. Like this podcast, it just ignites some sort of passion in me, and I honestly cannot wait to get some guests on here. I have some recordings coming up, so I'm really excited to get some people involved in this podcast and offer some new perspectives and some new angles, because there's lots to be said about this industry. There's lots of things to learn. I feel like it's a bit sort of philosophical as well, and introspective and reflective. I'd be so keen to know what your calling is, or what you believe your calling to be now. And you guys can let me know over on Instagram. You can tag me at alicelucybradley, or you can drop me a tweet at alicelucybradley. And I'd just love to hear from you. What is your calling? What is the purpose of your life? What sets your soul on fire? But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. I really hope it's been inspiring and it's helped those of you who are on your pursuit of finding your calling and your purpose. And don't forget, things can change very quickly. You know, life paths aren't straight. We are going on a journey together, and life is going to take us down many routes. So just enjoy it and embrace it. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to Staying Sweet, the podcast. If you enjoyed listening, please do leave a review, and I will catch you next week for a new episode. Stay sweet.